It was supposed to be a normal afternoon. Nora just needed to deliver one envelope. That was it. One envelope to a high-rise office in downtown Manhattan, then back to her freelance admin job across town. She didn't expect to be standing in front of glass doors, guarded by two sharp-suited men who looked at her like she didn't belong. But she straightened her shoulders anyway. She was used to that look. Being underestimated had become normal. "Delivery for Mr. Sterling," she said calmly, holding up the thick envelope. The taller guard narrowed his eyes. "Do you have an appointment?" "It's a sealed document from Silver and Cray Law," she replied, keeping her tone even. "They asked me to hand it to him personally." The other guard checked a tablet, then stepped aside. 22nd floor, top right. As the elevator climbed, Nora glanced at her reflection in the polished wall. Hair in a low bun, plain white blouse, dark jeans. Professional but unremarkable. That's how she liked it. Nothing about her should have drawn attention. But when the elevator opened and she stepped out into the minimalist steel and glass office, attention was exactly what she got. He was already standing there. Tall, commanding, with dark hair and a stare sharp enough to cut through silence. Dean Sterling, billionaire CEO of Sterling Ventures, a man the press loved to hate. Rumor said he hadn't smiled since 2009, and he was looking right at her. Nora walked forward slowly, trying not to flinch under the weight of his gaze. "This is for you," she said, extending the envelope. Dean didn't take it. "Who sent you?" he asked flatly. "Silver and Cray." "It's regarding your merger contract." He cut her off. "I asked who sent you." Nora blinked. "I just told you." "Cut the act," he said, stepping closer. His voice was calm but laced with something sharper. "I know your type. You flash some innocent eyes, walk in pretending to be someone else, hoping I'll fall for it and give you a seat at my table, or my bed." She froze. "What?" she whispered. "You want a photo for your blog, a story to sell, maybe even a lawsuit if I brush your shoulder by mistake," he went on, circling her like a wolf sizing up prey. "But I don't play that game, so take your act somewhere else." The room felt colder suddenly. Nora's fingers tightened around the envelope. "I don't know what kind of women you're used to," she said, her voice low but steady. "But I'm not one of them. I was paid $50 to bring this to your hand. That's it." Dean crossed his arms, still unconvinced. She stared at him for a moment longer, then slowly set the envelope on his glass desk. "You know," she said softly, "people with real power usually don't have to insult strangers to feel safe." Then she turned and walked out. She didn't look back. She didn't let her steps quicken until she was back in the elevator, fists clenched at her sides, heart pounding with a mix of fury and humiliation. That man was vile. No wonder the tabloids had a field day with him. Cold, condescending, calculated. Back in the office, Dean watched the elevator doors close. For a moment, he stood in silence. Then he looked at the envelope on his desk. Inside was a critical document about a merger worth over $1 billion, and he had just accused the messenger of being a scam artist. He swore under his breath. Still, something about her bothered him, not in the way women usually did. She wasn't flirtatious. She didn't try to impress him. She didn't even flinch when he accused her. She just looked disappointed. That irritated him more than he wanted to admit. Later that night, he tried to shake her image from his mind, but it clung to him like a thread that refused to break. The quiet defiance in her voice, the way she had looked at him like he wasn't worth her time, like she saw through him. He hated that look, and somehow he couldn't stop thinking about it. Nora had always believed in earning her place. She didn't come from wealth or privilege. Her father had been a mechanic with hands permanently stained by engine grease, and her mother a school secretary who never once missed a PTA meeting. They didn't have much, but they had enough. Enough love, enough honesty, enough pride in doing things the right way. After graduating with a degree in communications, Nora bounced from temp job to temp job, always working hard, never complaining. She'd helped pay her mother's hospital bills, kept the lights on when her younger brother got laid off, and spent countless nights freelancing just to scrape by. Her life wasn't glamorous, but it was hers, earned, honest. She never expected the rich to understand that, but she never expected one of them to accuse her of something so low, either. That night, she told herself to forget it. Dean Sterling probably insulted 5 people a day before breakfast. It wasn't personal, but as she sat at her tiny kitchen table with a microwave meal and the hum of the fridge in the background, she felt something heavy settle in her chest. Not because he insulted her, but because a part of her had actually looked up to him. She had followed his business trajectory for years, admired how he built Sterling Ventures from a crumbling inheritance into a powerhouse. He had been young, bold, and relentless, until he went quiet, until he started making headlines for lawsuits, security walls, and his ever colder demeanor. Now she knew why. The man who once took risks now trusted no one. She told herself he wasn't worth another thought. But people like him had a way of invading the quiet corners of your mind. Across town, Dean sat in his penthouse office, staring out at the city skyline. His jaw clenched, one hand holding a tumbler of whiskey he hadn't touched. His mind kept returning to the girl with the envelope. It wasn't just her words, it was her eyes. They weren't pleading, manipulative, or starstruck like the ones he was used to. They were tired, honest, unshaken. He hated that they made him feel something. Dean hadn't trusted a woman in years. Not since Celia. She had been everything on paper, beautiful, poised, connected, and for a year she had played the perfect girlfriend. The press called them a power couple. He'd almost believed it himself, until the day he found out she was feeding confidential company information to a competitor. She hadn't denied it. She had smiled and said, "I deserve more than being just the woman behind the man." Dean hadn't dated seriously since. To him, most women who entered his world did so for 2 reasons: money or exposure. He'd built his emotional armor thick and sharp, but this girl, Nora, she didn't ask for anything. She didn't even flinch when he tried to hurt her with words. That was what got to him. She hadn't tried to defend herself. She didn't think he was worth it, and that made him want to know more. The next morning, Dean asked his assistant, Marla, to pull up the file from the law firm. Marla blinked. "The Silver and Cray delivery yesterday?" "Yes." "There's no official record of a courier name, but I can find out." "Do that." Marla tilted her head. "Should I be worried?" Dean didn't respond. He just turned back to the window, a muscle twitching in his jaw. By noon, he had her name. Nora Bennett. Freelance assistant. Recently contracted for a few legal errands. No criminal history. Clean record. No signs of social media exploitation. No posts about him. No mention of yesterday. Nothing to gain. Nothing to prove. Just a girl trying to get her job done. Dean leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his palm. He had made a mistake, a rare one. And now, for reasons he couldn't explain, he wanted to fix it. But apologies weren't exactly his strong suit, especially not to someone who had every right to ignore him, especially not to someone who looked at him like he was just another disappointment in an expensive suit. Still, something inside him itched. He wanted to see her again, not to make things right, to understand why her silence had said more than most people's speeches. 2 days passed. Nora pushed the incident out of her mind. She went back to her usual routine: gig jobs, remote typing work, document runs for local firms that couldn't afford proper couriers. She told herself she didn't care about Dean Sterling or what he thought of her, and for the most part, she believed it, until her phone rang on a rainy Thursday morning. She was halfway through uploading scanned files when the call came in. The number was unknown. She hesitated for a second, then answered. "Hello? Miss Bennett?" A woman's voice said smoothly. "Yes. Who's calling?" "This is Marla Reed. I'm the executive assistant to Dean Sterling." Nora nearly dropped her phone. Marla continued, her voice brisk but polite. "Mr. Sterling would like to request a meeting. He asked if you're available today at 4 p.m. at his main office." Nora stared at her screen in disbelief. "For what?" "I believe it's to discuss an apology." That made her blink. "An apology?" "Yes. And a job." "A what?" Marla paused. "He didn't give me all the details. Just said he'd like to offer something to make up for the misunderstanding. He prefers to explain in person." Nora opened her mouth, closed it, then finally said, "I'll think about it." Marla didn't push. "If you decide to come, let the front desk know. I've cleared your name." The call ended. Nora stared at her phone like it had just confessed a secret. A job? From a man who thought she was a con artist? She didn't owe him anything. But a part of her burned to walk into that office, look him in the eye, and prove that she wasn't the girl he had pegged her as. Maybe she just wanted to see him look uncomfortable for once. At 3:57 p.m., she was in the elevator again, heart pounding, jaw set. She wore a navy blue blouse, black slacks, and her best attempt at heels. Not flashy, just strong. When she stepped out, Marla greeted her personally, guiding her into a smaller conference room filled with warm light and modern furniture. Dean was already there. He stood as she entered, hands behind his back. His expression was unreadable. "Miss Bennett," he said quietly, "thank you for coming." "I almost didn't." "I expected that." She sat without waiting for an invitation. "So?" Dean looked at her for a long moment, then he spoke. "I was wrong." Nora raised an eyebrow. "That's it?" He let out a breath, like the words themselves cost effort. "I misjudged you, and I'm not in the habit of doing that." "Maybe you should be." His mouth twitched, not quite a smile, not quite annoyance. "I run a large charity program," he continued, ignoring her jab. "We're expanding into community education grants, and I need someone to manage public communications. The work includes community outreach, speaking with families, field events. It pays well." Nora folded her arms. "Let me guess. You want me to take the job because it makes you feel better about being a jerk?" "No," he said, looking her in the eye. "I want you to take the job because I've read everything you've published. Your writing, your work for the local nonprofit blog. You're good. And because you're the first person in a long time to tell me exactly what I deserve to hear." That made her pause. "You're offering me a real job?" "Yes." "With benefits?" "Yes." "And you're not expecting anything in return?" "No." Silence hung between them. Nora stared at the glass wall behind him, then looked back. "You humiliated me." "I know. You assumed the worst." "I always do." She tilted her head. "Why?" Dean hesitated. Then he said, "Because assuming the worst keeps people from getting too close." The honesty surprised her more than the job offer. "I won't owe you," she said firmly. "I don't want you to," he said. After a long pause, she said, "Fine, I'll try it. But I want it in writing, a 90-day probation, no strings. If you so much as breathe down my neck the wrong way, I'm gone." He nodded once. "Done." Marla entered silently and handed over a draft contract. Nora scanned it quickly. Everything was as promised. As she signed, Dean said nothing. He watched her with the quiet intensity of someone trying to memorize every shift in her expression. When she stood to leave, he finally said, "You were right that day." Nora looked at him. "About what?" "People with real power don't have to insult strangers." She didn't smile, but her voice softened just enough to sting. "Glad you finally listened." She walked out without looking back, but her fingers were trembling, and so were his. The first few weeks passed with tense civility. Nora kept to her lane. She was punctual, precise, and refused to make small talk. She met with community leaders, wrote persuasive outreach materials, and even designed a campaign that raised $50,000 in 1 week. She didn't wait for praise, and Dean didn't offer it. But he watched her, more than he should have. He noticed how she spoke to people with care, especially the elderly and underfunded schools. He noticed how she typed faster when she was angry, and that she always left her tea bag in too long. He noticed the way she rolled her eyes when someone bragged too much, and how she quietly defended the janitor when another exec mocked his accent. She had a fire he hadn't expected, and patience she didn't advertise. One Thursday, they were forced to work late. A logistics error had left hundreds of donor packets unsent. Instead of pushing it to someone else, Nora stayed behind to handle it. Alone. At 8 p.m., Dean walked into the conference room to find her surrounded by envelopes and address labels. "You didn't have to do this yourself," he said. "I didn't want it to wait until Monday," she replied without looking up. "You could have asked someone to help." "I don't ask for favors." He stepped closer, hands in his pockets. "You still think working here is some kind of punishment?" She looked up. Her eyes were tired, but steady. "I don't think anything. I just do the work. That's the deal." Dean leaned against the table. "You're efficient, relentless, and you don't seem the least bit impressed by any of this." She glanced around at the glass walls, the art, the city view. "It's a nice cage, but still a cage." That made him pause. "Is that how you see it?" Nora returned to folding letters. "You built it to keep the world out. Can't blame me for noticing the bars." Dean said nothing. He couldn't. No one had ever said it that plainly before. After a long silence, he reached for a stack of labels and began helping. She blinked. "You're not serious." "I run this place," he said dryly. "I think I can handle some stickers." They worked in silence for a few minutes. The mood softened. Nora caught herself glancing at his hands, clean, strong, but precise. He didn't talk, didn't ask questions, just helped. It was oddly comforting. As midnight approached, the last envelope was sealed. They stood in the empty hallway, both exhausted, both unsure what to say. Finally, Dean spoke. "You know, you don't have to hate me." "I don't hate you," she replied. "I just don't trust people who judge first and think later. I'm trying to change that." Nora studied his face. "Why?" "Because someone called me out," he said quietly, and I realized she was right. Nora looked away. "Don't romanticize basic decency." "I'm not. I'm just saying you changed something. I don't know what yet, but I feel it." The air between them shifted. Something unspoken settled into place. Not quite affection, not quite friendship, but real. Weeks passed. Their professional partnership grew smoother, then easier, then warmer. Nora began staying a little longer after meetings. Dean started asking about her weekend plans. They laughed sometimes. Briefly, quietly, but it happened. One rainy afternoon, Dean invited her to join him on a site visit for the new youth center his company was funding. The project was in a struggling neighborhood, and his team had asked him to avoid media coverage. He brought Nora instead. They arrived in a dark SUV. Children played on the sidewalk under cloudy skies. A young boy kicked a deflated soccer ball near a broken fence. Dean stepped out first, formal as ever in a pressed coat and leather gloves. Nora followed in a blue trench coat and worn boots. As they walked through the gutted building, Nora stopped in front of a broken window. She looked at the cracked tile floors, the rusted lockers, the peeling paint. "This was a school once," she said softly. Dean nodded. "Shut down 5 years ago." And now it'll be a place for kids again. That's the plan. She looked at him, really looked. I didn't think someone like you cared about places like this. Dean's voice lowered. My father grew up a block away. I only found out after he died. Nora blinked. That's why I funded it, he added. Not for tax breaks, not for PR, just to fix something. The vulnerability in his voice took her by surprise, and the way he looked at her in that moment, raw and real, made something inside her soften. Later that night, back in the car, Nora sat quietly. Dean finally said, "What are you thinking?" She hesitated, then said, "I think you're not the man I met that day." Dean smiled slightly. "I think you are. Same honesty, same fire." Silence. Then she said, "Dean?" "Yes?" "Why did you choose me for this job?" He didn't look at her. "I didn't choose you," he said. "You showed up. I just finally paid attention." Her breath caught in her throat. That night, as she curled into bed, Nora couldn't sleep. Something had changed. Not in him, in her. She wasn't sure she could keep pretending she didn't care. It was a Friday morning when everything fell apart. Nora arrived at the office as usual, coffee in hand, prepared for another round of meetings and deadlines. Dean had been away for 2 days on business, and she hadn't heard from him. She tried not to care, but her heart had other plans. By noon, whispers began to spread. People stared. Emails stopped arriving. Meetings were quietly rescheduled. Nora noticed the shift. It was subtle, but undeniable. Eyes lingered longer. Conversations died when she entered the room. She brushed it off, until Marla walked in with a stiff face and a printed article in hand. "You need to see this," she said softly. Nora took the paper, confused. One glance and her stomach dropped. A gossip blog headline blared across the page. Dean Sterling's assistant or secret lover. Leaked photos suggest more than business. Below the headline were grainy surveillance images, her and Dean in the car together outside the youth center, walking into a building, standing close near a broken window. There was even one from the envelope incident months ago, with Dean's face clearly tense. The article painted her as a manipulator, a local nobody who had seduced her way into the heart of Manhattan's most unattainable bachelor. It implied she had used her role to gain influence and questioned whether the youth center project had been a ploy to buy public favor. It was cruel, it was calculated, and it spread fast. Nora stood in the hallway as people passed, murmuring. Her cheeks burned. She marched straight to Dean's office. He had just returned. He looked up when she entered, and his expression told her everything. He had seen it. "You think I leaked it?" she said quietly. Dean didn't answer right away. She took a step forward. "Do you?" He leaned back slowly. "The timing, the images. You said you didn't like attention, but somehow these photos exist. So that's a yes. I didn't say that. You didn't have to." Nora's throat tightened. "I thought we were past this. I've been used before, Nora. Forgive me for being cautious." She stared at him. The man who had helped her with labels, who had shared pieces of himself she didn't think he ever shared. And still, the second something went wrong, he reverted. "You asked me why I don't trust people like you," she said, voice shaking. "This is why. Because the minute the world says I don't belong, you agree with it." Dean stood, his jaw tight. "I have a company to protect. And I have a heart you just shattered." She turned and walked out before he could say anything more. The article went viral. Her name trended on social media. Photos she had no idea existed flooded the internet. A few old posts from her college blog were twisted and quoted out of context. She resigned that afternoon. No drama, no big scene, just a short email and a quiet exit. Dean didn't reply. Days turned to a week, then 2. Nora took small copywriting gigs again. She helped her neighbor with errands. She avoided the news, but she couldn't avoid the ache. She missed the work, the purpose. and painfully, she missed him, even if he had failed her. Across the city, Dean sat in his dark office, staring at an untouched glass of scotch. The building was quieter without her. Less color, less movement, less everything. He had told himself he did the right thing, that the article had forced his hand. But something gnawed at him. He had his team investigate the leak. It hadn't come from her. In fact, it had come from someone inside his own media division, a staffer paid off by a rival investor who stood to gain if Dean's reputation took a hit. When the full report landed on his desk, he read it twice, then a third time, and felt sick. She hadn't betrayed him. He had betrayed her. Marla entered cautiously. "Sir?" He didn't look up. "She hasn't contacted you." "I didn't expect her to. But you want her to." He didn't answer. "She believed in this company, in that project, in you," Marla said. "Even after what you said to her the first day, she still gave you a chance." Dean closed his eyes. "What are you going to do?" she asked gently. He stood, finally. "Fix it." That evening, he drove himself across town. No chauffeur, no suit, just a plain black coat and a worn leather folder tucked under his arm. He found her outside a corner library, helping an elderly man into a taxi. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup, sleeves rolled to her elbows. She was still the most real thing he'd ever seen. When she turned and saw him, her expression went cold. "Dean, I need 5 minutes." "Why?" "Because I didn't believe you when it mattered." She crossed her arms. "And now you do?" "I know who leaked the article. It wasn't you. I have proof." He handed her the folder. She didn't open it. "I don't care who did it," she said. "I care that you didn't trust me." "I was afraid. You were a coward." "Yes," he said quietly, "but not anymore." She hesitated. Her eyes searched his. "Why are you really here?" "Because every day without you feels like something's missing, and I think it's more than guilt." Nora swallowed hard. "I won't ask for your forgiveness," Dean said. "I just want to remind you of one thing." "What?" "You changed me." She said nothing. He stepped back. "If you ever want to come back, not to the company, but to me, I'll be here." Then he turned and walked away. Nora watched him go, heart pounding. She didn't know if she was ready, but for the first time, she knew he finally was. The next few days were quiet. Nora didn't respond to Dean. She didn't open the folder he gave her. She didn't search for him online or ask anyone what he was doing. But she didn't throw anything away either. The folder stayed on her nightstand. His words stayed in her head. Every now and then she found herself wondering what he meant by, "I'll be here." Was it a line, a tactic, or was it real? She tried to stay busy. She helped organize a book drive for a local school. She edited brochures for a small animal rescue. She tried to convince herself her chest didn't tighten every time she thought about how he had looked in that coat, standing in the cold, just waiting. Then came the letter. It arrived by regular mail. No logo, no formal return address, just her name written in clean, sharp strokes. Inside was a single page, handwritten. "Nora, I've drafted 100 versions of this. I deleted 99. This one is raw, honest, probably the only one that matters. I've built a life around protecting myself. Every decision I make runs through filters. Logic, risk, damage control. That works in business, but it's a disaster in love. I called you a gold digger because I was afraid that someone real had slipped past my defenses, afraid that if I let you in, I'd lose control. I didn't just doubt you, I doubted the part of me that still believes in good things. I was wrong. About you. About us. About what matters. If you never speak to me again, I understand. But if there's even the smallest part of you that's still curious, Come to the youth center opening this Saturday. You helped build it, you made it real. And so help me, if you walk through that door, I won't let you walk away again. Dean, she read it twice, then a third time. By the time Saturday came, she still hadn't decided what she was going to do. Her heart had. Her mind just hadn't caught up yet. The youth center bustled with life. Kids laughed in the halls. Parents wandered wide-eyed through brand-new classrooms, filled with art supplies and sports gear. There were banners, music, and tables of food. The press was there, but subdued. Dean stood near the entrance, greeting community leaders, shaking hands. But his eyes kept scanning the doorway. By noon, he started to lose hope. Then he saw her. She stepped through the door in a soft cream sweater and a navy skirt. Simple, elegant, strong. Their eyes met. For a second, everything else blurred. He stepped toward her slowly. "You came," he said, voice rougher than usual. "You said I built this," she replied. "I came to see if you meant it." He nodded. She looked around. "It's beautiful. You helped design the outreach programs, the reading corners, the family support desk. I didn't think you remembered." "I remember everything." There was a long pause. Then she said softly, "I read your letter. And I don't need grand speeches." He swallowed. "What do you need?" She met his eyes. "I need to know you're not going to run the next time something scares you." Dean nodded. "Then stay. Let me prove it." Nora glanced down, then looked back up. "I missed you," she whispered. He stepped closer. "I never stopped missing you." In front of the children and the parents and the staff, he reached for her hand. He didn't pull, just held it, like something precious. "Stay with me," he said. "Not for the company, not for a cause. Just stay." She squeezed his hand gently. "This isn't a movie, Dean." "No," he said, smiling. "It's better. You're real." They didn't kiss, not then, but it didn't matter. Everything had shifted. They were standing together again, not as employer and employee, not as accuser and accused, but as two people who had earned each other's trust. That night, he walked her home. No driver, just the two of them beneath the city lights. On her doorstep, she turned to him. "I'm not afraid of who you were," she said, "but I need to believe in who you're becoming. You're the reason I'm becoming him." She leaned in, kissed his cheek and whispered, "Then don't stop." Spring melted into summer, and things didn't return to the way they were. They grew into something new. Nora didn't move into Dean's world. He stepped into hers. They still had separate apartments. He still ran his company. She still freelanced part-time and kept her Thursdays open for volunteering at the youth center. They didn't rush. They didn't perform. They just built. It started with shared grocery trips, then mornings where she left tea on his kitchen counter before her meetings. Sometimes he would send her flowers, but only the kind she could replant. She once told him she hated waste. He never forgot. Every time Dean's instincts told him to pull back, to question, to protect, he paused. He remembered how she had walked away when he failed her. He remembered how she came back when he didn't deserve it. And every time Nora doubted whether this could work, whether love this unexpected could last, she reminded herself of who he was when no one was looking. Not the CEO in the headlines, not the man with walls, the man who had helped her stuff envelopes late into the night, the man who held her hand like a promise, not a possession. On their 6-month anniversary, he took her to a quiet coastal town 2 hours from the city. They walked along the shore. No cameras, no suits, just footprints in the sand and silence that felt easy. He stopped her near a tide pool. "I never told you why I stopped believing in love," he said, voice low. She didn't push, just waited. Dean looked out at the ocean. "Because I thought love was a transaction. Give something, expect something. That's how everyone treated me. Love came with invoices." He turned to her. Until you didn't want anything. You just were. She touched his arm gently. And you? I was guarded, cold, afraid. He smiled, just barely. You didn't try to fix that. You just stayed long enough for me to want to fix it myself. Nora looked at him, heart full. I didn't stay to change you, she said. I stayed because you started changing on your own. He pulled something from his pocket, a small box. Simple, soft, no shine. She blinked. I'm not asking you to marry me, he said quickly. Not today. I wanted to give you this. Inside was a ring, not diamond, not gold, a simple silver band engraved with the words, You're the reason. Nora pressed her lips together, emotion catching in her throat. He took her hand. Whatever comes next, he said softly, I want to face it with you. No titles, no headlines, just us. She slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. I believe you, she whispered. He kissed her then. Slow, certain. The kind of kiss that didn't ask for anything. The kind that simply said, I'm here. Later that night, as they watched the sun sink behind the horizon, Nora rested her head against his shoulder and whispered, I used to think love had to be perfect to be real. And now? He asked. She smiled. Now I know it just has to be true.
I hope you enjoyed this thrilling journey. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? Let me know in the comments below. Your feedback inspires more epic tales.